All right, over to you.
Cool. All right, good morning and welcome to the AWS Cluster API Implementation Office Hours. It's a beautiful 10 a.m., 10:04 here, US Pacific. Hope everyone's having a lovely day. This meeting is being recorded, just so everyone is aware, and we will post the recording after the meeting. This morning we have a couple of PSAs. Jason, is this something you'll usually go through?
Yeah, I can take this. Just as a heads up, the version 0.5.4 release has been cut. There are a couple of new features, a few bug fixes, and some other miscellaneous changes that went in. All of that's in the notes for this meeting and also in the release notes.
Ooh, excellent. Lots of good stuff going on in there. Any questions about the 0.5.4 release? Cool. All right. Let's head over to the group topics. Is Andy on?
Hello.
Good morning.
So I just wanted to put a couple things in here that we're looking at hopefully implementing soon. So the first one is customizing the CNI security or CNI ports for the security groups. So we are trying to look at using a different CNI as an option besides just having Calico hard coded. So this one is called Antrea, and it uses different ports than Calico's. And we looked at a couple of options. One could be we just add the Antrea ports like we have the Calico ports and just have it be the union of the two. But we didn't think that that would be good for the community, because if you are not interested in using either Calico or Antrea, having all of those ports forced on you didn't seem like a great thing. So what we are proposing and what Gab from our side is working on is an addition that's optional to the AWS cluster spec to allow you to specify the ingress rules that you would like to have specifically for CNI. And the way that we're designing it is that if you omit it and don't specify it at all, you just get the same behavior that we have today. So you get the Calico rules added by default. If you do specify this field, then you're in complete control over what CNI ports or what ports you want open specifically for CNI. So this would replace the Calico defaults and let you put your own in. You could put Calico in if you wanted to, or you could do the Antrea ones or something else. And so we do have a pull request open. You can see it linked on the right side. So if folks are interested, please look at the issue, please look at the PR, and hopefully we can get that in fairly soon once it goes through review. So any questions or comments on this one before I move on to my second group topic?
I'm trying to remember. So we use the AWS VPC CNI. I don't recall if that actually needs anything specific outside of just like being able to communicate with itself. I'm looking at Seth's face. But I'm curious, so like, for example, if I submitted like an empty ingress rules, obviously I can look at the PR, like, would that just give me nothing?
Well, we had some commentary back and forth on it. And initially I said, sure, if you want to have no rules, just submit a CNI spec with no rules. Or maybe like, would that make sense? Would it not make sense? And so where we currently landed is that you have to have some rules if you specify this field, because we didn't think it would make sense to say, I want to set up my CNI rules and have there be none. but maybe there is a need for that.
Cool. Sounds good.
I do see Nadir has his hand up.
Oh, Nadir, to you.
Yes, I think you might still want to turn on node port services between hosts anyway. So, and I might be different for AWS, VPC, CNI. So I think there might be still at least one rule that was being set that you might want to set. I'm not sure though.
I know there is a separate rule for node ports
Oh yeah.
in the securitygroups.go file.
Okay. Yeah. So there are still some like default rules that just have nothing to do with the CNI specific rules that go through. Okay, cool. That makes sense.
Yeah, so this one, that's right. This only affects the two rules that are specific to Calico right now, which are BGP and IP and IP. And I think in the future, like if we needed to say like no CNI rules, we could find some way to do that. But I know that Nadir has talked about like revamping the way that we do networking in Kappa entirely for a like V1 Alpha 4, like a breaking API change that would probably be the place to do something like that as part of the re-envisioning.
Cool. Good to move on to your next topic, I think.
Okay, cool. Sorry, dealing with some bread making issues at home. So we've had some users of TKG since TKG uses Cluster API. We've had some users who are interested in not having the Bastion security group always be open to the world on port 22. So I don't know the person who filed this issue. It was from a while ago. But this is basically what we'd like to do is allow us to specify the CIDR blocks for the Bastion, not necessarily trying to disable the Bastion security group right now, just trying to make like a minimal change that'll allow us to configure the inbound CIDRs. So mostly just a heads up that we'd like to see this go in, and we'll probably find somebody to work on it. And this was just some back and forth that as you're scrolling through on, does it need to be omit empty, and how do we do no rules versus default or some rules, and just some experimentation with things.
Cool. Sounds pretty reasonable. All right. And then Nadir, you just added about the default subnet logic.
Yeah, so I know we've had a bit of back and forth on Slack. So basically the PR improves the way subnets are chosen, especially when you bring your own VPC, but now it requires you to specify those subnets. I mean, that's probably correct, but it is technically an API change. Have we reached consensus on doing it within the current release series?
So I think the biggest issue that I would have is if it caused any issues for pre-existing clusters, because I think with the proposed changes, it brings things more in line with how users had expected it to work in the past. And we weren't necessarily honoring that. But as long as, we're not breaking actual running clusters that may have worked with the previous behavior, I think it's probably fine to go ahead and make the changes.
Cool. So for this PR, it's good for review. Like, do we think we need to ask more people for opinions? What do we think? Just test it and do it.
I see Seth has his hand raised.
Yes, Seth.
Oh, yeah, I think where I've landed on that having that same concern, Jason, is that it should be fine for existing clusters because we write back to the spec when we do the discovery today. And so it populated the things that the change is going to look for after this is merged. So yeah, I feel, sorry.
Can I ask a question? Is it Cedar? How do you include IPv6 in this? In that, does it include or exclude that?
IPv6 for, I don't think it actually, the breaking change specifically doesn't have anything to do with IPv6. It changes from having cluster API auto-discover all subnets associated with the VPC that you hand it to only looking at the ones that you ask it to look at. So if you configured IPv6 on some of your subnets, like it could matter maybe in this sense, but that's the, like cluster API doesn't do anything right now with that, I think. If that answers your question.
Okay, fine. That's fine as long as we are aware of it.
And I see Nadir has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say we have no explicit support for IPv6 as at the moment. I mean, there's nothing in Kappa that has any logic around IPv6 VPCs, subnets, etc. So it might work if you bring your own, but it's not tested in any way.
Cool. Seth, did you have more on that? Cool. All right. Are there any other topics folks want to bring up before we go into the issue triage? Cool. Let's do that. Let's see. Now this is usually what issues with no milestone.
Correct.
Cool. All right. Have we gone over this one before? The spec control plane endpoint bits?
Yeah, no, it's. I need to refine that. I think we can close it, but I need to check with the person. I chatted to them upstream. I did say that last week, and I didn't do it. Sorry.
All right. I can type something angry in here if. All right. Cool. That sounds good. Okay, so we have an RFE from Seth for, okay, this has priority important long-term on it. Should I slap milestone next on this? Do we need to talk about it?
I think the biggest thing was trying to figure out if it was going to require any breaking API changes or if there was going to be a way to implement it without breaking API changes to determine the milestone.
I think it's possible to do without breaking API changes as long as we don't mind stuffing critical fields and behavior into annotations, which is kind of a trade-off.
So would there be a way to do additive API changes to provide this functionality?
Yes, the trick is that we don't know what fields to add, I think. And so that's what makes it challenging to change later.
All right, so I can tentatively go ahead and put this in 0.5.x, and if we determine that it requires any breaking changes, then we can update it as needed.
Sounds good. Here we have add conditions to AWS cluster. Okay, this has a whip PR for it. Do we know when we expect this milestone to close? Do we think this will fit in?
I do. This is going along with the conditions work that's happening in core cluster API and some of the other providers as well. And Gab's also has the open PR and working on addressing changes there.
Cool. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, ability to run conformance tests with different CNI. I have not seen this one yet. Okay, so this is basically like being able to just pass in, like bring your own YAML for the CNI and allow the conformance tests to run.
So I think we have an existing issue, number 1588, which is very similar to this, although a little bit more vague as well.
Cool. So this probably fits in to the important long-term bucket, but I will reference 1588 just in case here. Cool. That sounds good. I mean, this is, I don't know about this milestone.
Do you have thoughts on that one, Andy?
Sorry, I'm multitasking. What was the question?
This ability to run conformance tests with a different CNI issue. We've got it classified as priority, important long-term, just trying to determine milestone. I didn't know if you had any.
Next, would that make sense?
Yep. Sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Validate AWS tags. This is from last Friday.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think we asked Richard to break that out of, it was from a discussion on this one of the other PRs, and we said to bring it out into a separate issue. It could be done in this milestone. It could. It's not really no API change. It's just validation. So I don't know where we want to put it.
I think it's probably fine to go ahead and add to the milestone if Richard or somebody else is willing to pick it up. It does have the help wanted tag. And when we get closer to closing out the 05X series, we can always bump it out if we need to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Anybody have thoughts on priority for this one? I'm leaning towards long term, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think long term sounds good. Would we want to put good first issue on this, given that sounds like you could go look at the AWS docs and figure out what sort of validation we need to put in place?
I'm maybe a little hesitant on good first issue because I'm not sure we have enough context in there for somebody who's not already familiar with the project or the code to really run with this issue.
Should we consider updating the description to make it more friendly to as a good first issue, or just leave it and somebody who's got more experience can get to it when they can?
I think that's a great idea. Do we have any volunteers to do that?
Yeah, I can add some more detail here. I think the gap is just kind of understanding how to get into like the webhook code, right? Like if someone with no context on queue builder, controller runtime, style code might not really have any idea how to validate something from the perspective of this. So I can take that on. I'll assign myself for now, and just so I know to update it, and then I'll unassign later.
Yeah, I think the other important part would be is show some of the different places where we're potentially creating tags as well. Because we do have the difference between some of the different services that we expose, depending on the different API SDKs.
All right, I think we've done the thing. This last one was Nadir's takeaway. I'll just sit here and click refresh until it goes away. No, I'm just kidding. Cool. Well, if there are no questions or topics, I think we can save 32 minutes. Excellent. Well, everyone have a wonderful rest of the day, evening, morning, wherever you are.
So.
Thank you, Andrew. And if anybody else wants to host a meeting, feel free to reach out. Happy to have volunteers.